So I have a pet peeve kind of in my mind. That song that stayed with me since I was a teenager. And the reason why is because I used to watch MuchMusic Power Hour.
Okay.
And they would play, metal videos. And this is like 86, right? I was 17 years old. And I wanted to see.
I wasn't alive. Go on.
I wanted to see like Motley Crue and Iron Maiden. And they would play this video for Dazed and Confused. and the Power Hours was only an hour. So they played like maybe, I don't know, 8 videos. And it was like, dude, this is like once a week. Like you can't waste time by playing fucking Dazed and Confused. Like this is for older people. This is not for a 17-year-old kid in 1986. So Don't funny. Waste my time.
I do want to bring up though, look at, you're wearing what looks like a navy blue shirt, but there's something more to that shirt you're wearing.
Yeah. So
my 100% Canadian.
Lift it up with it, taking it off. It's tragically hit. So the cool thing about this shirt, there's 2 cool things about it. Mm-hmm. So people might be familiar with this pattern.
Okay.
Know that the maple leaf is kind of the culmination of all of the titles of the Tragically Hip records. But the other cool thing about this shirt is that it was given to me by an American. And so, yeah, it's weird, right? So I was down,
you Canadians, you like Canadian stuff, eh? Thanks.
So I was down in New York City visiting a bunch of people. And my friend Liam Hayden, who's from New Jersey, took me out to dinner, and he reaches under the table and he pulls his bag out and he puts it on the table and it's like, I got you something. And so I open the bag and it's this shirt. And I'm like, this is the weirdest gift from like a person from New Jersey. Right?
New Jersey gave you a bag with a hip shirt. Didn't give you a bag of weed. He gave you a bag with a hip shirt in it.
Exactly.
Love it. You got
strange.
That's great, man. That's awesome. That's so nice.
Super thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
He's really cool.
Liam Hayden. Any relation to Basil?
You mean this guy?
That guy.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about Led Zeppelin first record. Led Zeppelin's first record.
Led Zeppelin. It's like Van Halen. Do you call it Led Zeppelin 1?
I almost said like Led Zeppelin 1, and it's not, right? So it's Led Zeppelin. That's it. It's not Led Zeppelin 1. It's Led Zeppelin. Tell me about what you thought of the record. And we'll go through, same format. We'll go through song by song.
Yep.
And then I'll tell you what my kind of perspective is if you care to hear it.
This is my kind of rock and roll, man. I love this record.
Oh, you do?
I do. This is great. This is great rock and roll, man. What is it, 69? This album came out?
January 69 it came out. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I know people were kind of getting a taste, obviously, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and things like that, obviously, from that. But this was, when you listen to the solos on this album, obviously the Yardbirds, Jimmy Page's original band with Jeff Beck as well, which is, people kind of already had a bit of a sense of what, where music was headed. But man, I just loved Good Times, Bad Times to kick it off. Great.
Oh, me too.
And the way that Page's solos appear throughout this album are so good. They're so reminiscent of some solos you can hear today. Like you just understand where that influence came from for a lot of these bands. And and I thought it was interesting I'm really giving you a lot of props here. I think this is like the 3rd or 4th episode I'm going to mention your book, but you mentioned in your book talking about Wolfmother's Joker and the Thief, how people listen to that and they're like, oh, this just sounds, and I read that and I'm like, I was one of those people. I heard that riff in Joker and the Thief and I'm like, this is so fucking cool. Like this is, but then I'm like, this is nothing that hasn't been done before. But at the time when I heard the riff, I was like, this sounds so awesome. So when you hear something like Page's solos especially in Good Time, Bad Time in 1969. My God, like I'd love to put myself back there to hear this kind of music when it first comes out.
So it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking that exact same thing. I just recently listened to this record, and Good Times, Bad Times. I was thinking, the first thing that occurred to me in my head was, what a thrill it would have been to hear this come out in real time, like in contemporary time, like in 1969, right? And I'd heard stories from people before who said, Led Zeppelin scared people. It was mostly communication breakdown when they heard it. It was like, because it was heavy metal-ish, right? It was like that chug chug riff,
right? Again, at the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were bands like Cream and even Cactus, Black Sabbath, but it was heavy. Communication breakdown was heavy, but Good Times, Bad Times was exciting, right? Because you hear that like that right off the bat, and then it's like, ooh. And then the cool thing is you hear that cowbell that sounds kind of, it's almost got like a Who influence for me, right? It sounds like something Keith Moon would have done. Tick, 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 tick. And then it's like, oh, what's going to happen next? And then you hear the guitar again. And then the drum fill, which is so fantastic by Bonham, right? And then you hear Plant's voice, and it's like butter, right? He's singing in that perfect Plant register that it's high, and it's just like, oh my God, in the days of my youth. And it's like that the first 20 seconds of that song just give me, the skin vibration, like
completely set the stage for Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
It completely set the stage. There's no questioning it. We talked about Aerosmith's first album. It was kind of like, you didn't really, Steven Tyler was like, it was good. There was some good songs, One Way Street, Mama Can, it was good, but it was kind of like, it wasn't really there, and then we get into Van Halen. We've talked about Van Halen's first album being just absolutely phenomenal, yes, again, in one's opinion. And then now you're thinking about this being Led Zeppelin's first album together, what an introduction, and again, what a stage setter.
And do you know about the background of this record, like how it came together and everything?
Like in the sense of like Page needed a band, right, to fill out some concerts that he had committed to for the Yardbirds.
Exactly. So the Yardbirds kind of left him in the lurch, right? I think two guys left the band. I don't remember their names, but then the third guy left the band, and it was basically Page who was on the hook for these contracts. And I want to say it was Scandinavia. Yeah. Somewhere in Europe.
You're correct.
And he didn't know what to do. So he kind of just went around recruiting. I think he picked up John Paul Jones because he was also a session musician. Mm-hmm. And then he wanted to get another singer, and I can't remember the singer's name, but Plant was his second choice. Interestingly enough.
Crazy.
Isn't that weird?
So crazy. Same with the Deep Purple thing. Sorry, Brent. Same with the Deep Purple thing. Like, for them to be, Richie Blackmore to be going after, anybody other than David Coverdale. So sorry, go on.
I know it's hard to imagine, right? And it's one of those, it's almost like a sliding doors type of thing. Like it's very hard to imagine Coverdale not singing Burn. I mean, it would be interesting that would be a very interesting thing, if you had the power to go back and kind of do that sliding doors thing where Paul Rodgers did join Deep Purple and sang Burn. What would that be like?
It'd be the exact same.
What would have happened to David Coverdale? Would there be a Whitesnake? We talked about that. It's just all these pieces that moved in a certain way. Yeah. If you had the power to kind of reach down and move the pieces, the opposite way or an alternate way,
it's butterfly effect. Butterfly effect.
It really is. Yeah. Anyway, so Page recruited Plant ultimately, who brought in John Bonham, his buddy. And they were just this slapdash band, right? Who were together, and they fulfilled the contract dates. And then while they were doing that, they wrote Led Zeppelin. They wrote the first record on the road and rehearsed the stuff. And when they were done, they went into Olympic Studios, I believe, and the album was recorded, no shit, in 36 hours. 36 hours. You believe that? So Page paid for it. He paid for the session time, which was 36 hours on the log sheet. And I think that their manager also paid for a little bit of it. But
Peter Grant.
Peter Grant. Yeah. That's how the record was done. It was like £1,700.
Page also paid Plant and Bonham, did he not? Did he not pay those guys? No, I thought he paid them as well. No,
I don't think so. No, he paid for the record to be made. They didn't even have a contract at the time, but he was so confident in this band. And that's another funny story that people probably do know about how the band got their name, because he called them for a little while the New Yardbirds. But then he was talking at some point along the way to Moon and Entwistle from The Who and Beck. So the four of them are having a conversation, and Page proposed that they start a band. And so Keith Moon said that would probably go over like a lead balloon. And Entwistle jumped in and said, a Led Zeppelin. And Page was like, hey. And that's where the name came from.
That's so cool. That's amazing.
Isn't that neat?
So did Beck not play in the Yardbirds until later? I thought he played with them originally.
Clapton, Beck, and Page all kind of, I think I don't know a lot about that period. I think they overlapped a little bit. I don't think they all played in there at the same time. Obviously, the three guitar players, but
no. But I thought Beck and Page were good buddies that went back to
Certainly.
School. Yeah,
they were. But then on Led Zeppelin I, there was a tune. I can't remember what it was. It could have been Dazed and Confused. I could be wrong about that. No, it was You Shook Me. Led Zeppelin recorded it, and I think that they used the exact same arrangement that Beck used on Truth, which came out, I think, a couple of months before, and Beck was pissed about it. He didn't like that at all, and so the friendship was strained.
Yeah, and ultimately, You Shook Me was that's too bad, because that's one.
I think it was You Shook Me. It was You Shook Me or I Can't Quit You, Baby. One of those.
That to me, I really love this album. Again, I'm just gonna dive right into that. But You Shook Me is it's a meh song on this record. But before we get into that, do you have anything else about Good Times, Bad Times, or? So
the only thing I'll say, I love, that's one of my favorite Zeppelin tunes, and to say that is quite something, right? Obviously, just because I could say that about 20 other songs. There's so many good ones, but there are just so many great points that, you touched on the fact that the solo comes in, and it's just like this. It just sounds like so perfect, in the same way the Heartbreaker solo does. Like, it's just so, it cuts through, and it's how a guitar should sound, And the cool thing is they do that little pause before, right? So it's like a little kind of enticer. They stop the song and this and then they go into the solo, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, totally.
Like you get pulled in.
It almost feels like the neck on the guitar never ends. The way that Page keeps going, the neck, it just feels like it's just going to keep going.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's so good.
It's fantastic.
So Babe, I'm going to Leave You follows that up. And I've always found it interesting. And I mentioned this with a couple of Stones albums, how they followed up with a bit of a slower song. So I've always been interested as to why song 2 would start out a little bit more slowly. I guess it's because it's album 1. We can do whatever we want. I mean, you're also, eventually Led Zeppelin, you can do whatever you want. We determined that too with Van Halen. These guys were going to do whatever they wanted. I'm sure was the mentality, but I just found it so interesting, especially from the time being in that time, that you would kind of follow up a tune like Good Times, Bad Times with something like Babe, I'm Going to Leave You, that starts out slow, that starts out very, melancholic. And then, man, the way that this turns and just brings in this wicked riff, it just, you can't help but just, like, I don't know, it's something to me about this song emotionally triggers, like, the way that it kicks into that from being so slow, and then like, there's something like, if you don't feel it while listening to it, this buildup of emotion that kind of almost comes out of nowhere due to the riff that comes with it.
Yeah.
You don't love music.
Well, you know, you make a great point, right? It's true. There's a perfect amount of light and shade in that song. You know, there's a great
Yes.
balance there. And I read somewhere that Page wanted that for the song, and it was written by a woman in the 50s named Anne Breeden, and apparently Plant sung the whole thing flat, like not key wise flat, but just in the same like
Never.
heavy way.
Yeah.
And Page approached Plant after and said, do you mind if like you kind of like, you know, add some like heaviness, but then kind of tone it down in certain places a little bit. And so that's when you hear, if you I think it's the third verse after the solo, you know, there's a little bit of kind of vocal dynamics there. That was Page's suggestion to Plant, and he took it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that he takes this. I love the way that it is. Again, it's gritty. It's that it's real. Again, it comes down to being, it's the same thing in what you hear in the Stones at this time too. I mean, it's the recording, right? It's how they recorded music at this time. It feels and sounds so much like you're just there with them, you know?
That's exactly right. Yeah. You know, the cool thing that Page produced this record, by the way. So it was mixed by a guy named Glenn Johns, which was, he went on to produce all kinds of great records, but he was a friend of Page's. Page did this like on the cheap, like, which is ridiculous, right? It's almost like a White Stripes record kind of, you know, 20 years ago. That's what he was trying to achieve, you know? What Page did was he would set up, typically what they do in the studios, they'll set up like a microphone, like right off the amp or right off the kick drum, right? So he set that up, but then he set up an additional microphone 20 feet back from that first microphone. And he used a blend of those two recordings. And it kind of created this ambient sound. And that's how you get that kind of loose, very ambient, you know, feel of the record that you hear. It's just very big and dense.
And the mixing of this is perfect as well, when, you know, with these headphones on, the way, and that's something that in You Shook Me that actually really stood out to me, as much as it was more of a blah song to me on the album. Mm-hmm. You can really feel during the solo around the 3.5 minute mark, the panning that they did, that was just, I know it just feels so like ignorant of me and so amateurish of me to know that this is what that's what they were doing still back in the late 60s and whatever, you know, like that they still did those techniques. But man, it was just, it's really cool the way that even just the final mix came together for these songs. It sounds so good when you put headphones on, or if you can listen into it in a, you know, a surround sound setting. I could just imagine it being ethereal, you know?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to describe it. And that's all down to Page, really. Mm-hmm. So he was an experimenter, and he was so methodical. And of those three guys in the Yardbirds, you know, he was the guy who had the most vision, right? In terms of that sort of thing. He would play guitar in different keys. He would fool around with tunings. He would fool around with gear. And he just, you know, you think about, you know, you go through Led Zeppelin's catalog, and there's so much evidence of that, of just, you know, his he's always got his hands in there. That, you know, typically that's the producer and the engineer who kind of oversee that stuff. But he was always right in there saying, let's try this or let's try that.
Love it, man. Gotta love to have somebody in there to do that as part of the band, to be there, just, you know, being so involved and not just leaving it up to it. And again, I just feel like that's just so indicative of the times, you know. It's like, we're here making music, and you know, the cost of it. That's why, you know, they understood that it was going to be 36. They did it in such a short amount of time because of the cost, hours. Right? I mean, that's insane. Like, you know, and again, really comes down to this fact, and we talked about it with Van Halen, of how bands needed to play these songs. They played these songs for a long time. They played them for a long time. They played them live. I get it. They weren't, Led Zeppelin wasn't a band for a long time before recording this, but they were together all the time, touring, playing, to the point where they could get in and play something and do something like this.
that there was so much legitimacy to that kind of idea, right? Because they did the work, really. So they were on the road and they practiced and they rehearsed and they rehearsed and they rehearsed and they knew the material, and all they had to do was play the songs a couple times and it was done, right? Like nowadays, people are like, "Can I do it over again?" Like it's just they didn't do that because I don't know, man. It was just a different time. They did this record in 36 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you think of You Shook Me? What are your thoughts on that song?
You Shook Me, for me, I'm going to be really honest. And again, I'm probably going to get some rocks thrown at me for this. This entire record for me, Led Zeppelin, is not one of my favorite Led Zeppelin records.
Okay.
The first two songs are my favorite. Two tunes from the album. You Shook Me, it's a good blues tune. I mean, but that's really, for me, that's as far as it goes. It's a standard in my mind, right? I Can't Quit You, Baby is the same. I say that with utmost respect, but it's just not my thing.
So then Dazed and Confused, I mean, that's kind of a classic. No, is that not sort of like a nostalgic sort of, like when you think of Zepp, it's like Dazed and Confused?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. So I have a pet peeve kind of in my mind. That song that stayed with me since I was a teenager. And the reason why is because I used to watch MuchMusic Power Hour.
Okay.
And they would play, metal videos. And this is like 86, right? I was 17 years old. And I wanted to see.
I wasn't alive. Go on.
Come on, Sonny.
Yeah.
Music was so much better back then.
I agree.
But I wanted to see like Motley Crue and Iron Maiden, right? I wanted to see flash and color and fire. And they would play this video for Dazed and Confused. And the Power Hours was only an hour. So they played like maybe, I don't know, 8 videos. And it was like, dude, this is like once a week. Like you can't waste time by playing fucking Dazed and Confused. Like this is for older people. This is not for a 17-year-old kid in 1986. So don't funny. Waste my time, because it's also very long, right? So I'm like swearing at the TV going, come on, why are you playing this?
Yeah.
Because it's not heavy metal, by the way.
That's hilarious.
So like by that, like at least light the violin bow on fire or something,
That is absolutely hilarious.
It's a great song. I just my not quite fully developed 17-year-old brain did not accept the fact that it was a fantastic tune, and I wanted to see Motley Crue and Iron Maiden instead.
The thing I really like about it is the interesting textures that they bring into their songs, and then again where they lead it and where it takes you. And again, something I said back in Aerosmith days was I really enjoyed how you didn't really know where they were going to take you. And I think the same can be said of Led Zeppelin here, which obviously came before Aerosmith. But in what I'm discovering now, I just really appreciate spontaneity, I think, of where the songs take you.
Now, interesting point about, unfortunate point about Dazed and Confused. That song was written by a guy named, I think his name is Jake Holmes.
Okay.
Less than 2 years before Zeppelin put it out. And if you didn't know already, Jimmy Page had a penchant for putting his name on things that he perhaps maybe shouldn't have put his name on.
Interesting.
There are a number of old blues standards that he would kind of adopt.
And the Stairway to Heaven, was it not? Was Stairway to Heaven?
There was a ton, and they were all settled out of court. And if we do more Zeppelin records, we'll go through, because Led Zeppelin II was rife with ripoffs, like rife.
Wild.
But Dazed and Confused was the very first time, and he did that to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I was saying that song was written by a woman named Anne Breeden, and she found out in the 80s that Led Zeppelin did this tune, and she piped up and she got paid.
Oh wow!
With super royalties after the fact. Yeah,
and that was a song that Plant heard Joan Baez sing too on a
yes, she did a cover of it, but it was not hers. See what they did with that song, and this is a crafty little trick. Joan Baez did this too. They would do, in the credits, traditional arrangement by, and put their name beside it. Now, when you do that, when you say traditional arrangement, that is typically used for songs that have been passed down through the generation in like blues and jazz circles. You don't know who the author was. You don't know who the composer was. That's why you do it. So you say, Go Tell It on the Mountain, traditional arrangement by Brent Jensen, and then it's yours. You get all the royalties for that song, and you don't have to pay the composer because a lot of people don't know who it is, right? That's how it worked. Now, Joan Baez, I think she did know it was Anne Breeden. I'm not sure how that worked out, but Jimmy Page, I don't know if he knew or not, but he said, and it says on the record, traditional arrangement by Jimmy Page. Dazed and Confused, the song was written 2 years before, traditional arrangement by Jimmy Page. And it was written by that guy, Jake Holmes. He sued out of court, huge settlement. And Led Zeppelin, if we go through the records, there were a lot of unfortunate. They did it a lot.
Because they've been sticklers, right? They've been sticklers for nobody using their music. They've been sticklers for nobody ripping off their songs.
Yeah. I mean, people like Stones did it. Stones would steal a little bit from Robert Johnson. Everybody nicks a little bit, right? They all nicked from other artists, but like Led Zeppelin was so brazen about it, so brazen. Yeah. Wow. They literally would take songs and just say that they wrote them. They would maybe, and at one point, I'll get into this next episode, but Plant drew some ire from Page because he didn't switch the lyrics, and they got sued for it, and there was some controversy there too.
Wow.
So yeah.
All right. Anyway. We'll get into that. That. So that's Dazed and Confused. Your time is gonna come. It's after that. I love this song. This is my favorite song off the album.
Oh, really? This is good. I like this too.
This is very much. I love the chorus. I love the opening, the organ opening, and the way that the acoustic guitar blends with the vocals. It just all about this song. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I agree.
And that leads into Black Mountainside, which is a really cool acoustic jam.
I like it, but as you go on, and I don't know how much you know about Led Zeppelin in terms of their catalog, but there's better stuff. So the first thing I think of when I think about that is Braun Ior Stomp, it's called, and that's on Led Zeppelin III. And when you hear that, when we get to that point, look out, man.
Doesn't even matter. Well, I'm on one, and listening to one, I'm a big. I love it. I love this. It almost makes you feel like Van Halen took notes out of Led Zeppelin's notebook.
I'm actually glad that I said for me, like, I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan, and I'm familiar with their entire catalog. This record for me, great start, but it's almost like Aerosmith's start. There were one or two really strong tracks. Most of it was capable. It's good. I mean, it's really good given the time period, which was much different from Aerosmith's. But, there's not a lot of songs and just because, I think about things like Physical Graffiti and Houses of the Holy, it's just always kind of been like, I would never put this record on.
Really?
No.
Brent, you're surprising me here.
Why?
Because I feel like this is a great rock and roll album.
I'm glad that you do. I'm actually glad. I'm very glad because it is a good record.
Yeah.
The fact that I don't care that much for it doesn't mean that it's not a good record. I know. To me,
you're my mentor.
Yeah, but wait till we get to like 2. Led Zeppelin 2 is a fantastic record. 3 is even better in my opinion. 4 is like ridiculous. Houses of the Holy is so good. And then Physical Graffiti, look out, man. Like it's lights out. Like it's lights out. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot of work to do.
Well, I'm excited to get through into those other ones. Communication Breakdown is it's cool. It's gritty. It's bopper. Like that's it. It's a rock and roll tune. There's nothing special about it.
That's it.
It is what it is. I guess if you want to get into the lyrics, sure. You know me, I'm never into the lyrics, which probably bugs a shit ton of people. I Can't Quit You, Baby. Another kind of just great kind of bluesy tune. These guys.
Same as You Shook Me, basically.
Yeah, really, basically. Right? Yeah. But I think your time is going to come, though. So I know you didn't say that, but when I think about that song,
Yeah.
I feel like lyrically it's a song, it's a message about like, hey, your time's gonna come, which is like, towards like the woman, like, hey, like, you might be whatever, but your time's gonna come. Like, you're gonna treat me like this, I'm gonna treat you like that. And then you get into like, I can't quit you, baby. It's almost like, what is this album about? Like, is this about, is this anything? Is this trying to be like, babe, I'm going to leave you and I'm dazed and confused, but your time's going to come. But you know what? There's a communication breakdown. I can't quit you. And then how many more times? No, right? It's kind of like,
it's just a collection of, I think, what this record is a collection of, standards and material that reflected the time. And the reason why there are two, You Shook Me and I Can't Quit You, Babe, was because there was this big British blues boom that was going on at the time, and they wanted to kind of attach themselves to that kind of rocket ship that was coming up.
I love everything about the album. Again, I guess I'm not really against anything. I get it. You Shook Me is just kind of a blues tune. I say that because there's nothing special about them that really stand out to me, but
right,
musicianship, it's out of this world. And you get into how many more times? It's an 8.5 minute epic tune. I would listen to that song because it's a great rock and roll. Like it's like you with a song like this, you lose the fact of length of time. You throw that out the window. If you didn't think about that, if you didn't see, the problem is when you bring up streaming services or when you look at these things, right, you can see it's 8.5 minutes. And right away mentally you go, I don't have that kind of time. Me as a millennial, fucking get that. That's me. That's my life.
That's a really good point you just made there. The difference, right? So people of my vintage were almost forced to listen to the song, right? Unless you wanted to get up and rewind or fast forward or like lift the needle up, you didn't have a choice. But now, and I do this myself, like you skip or you kind of like move, you can actually move the song ahead with it. Like you just put your finger on the, do you know what I mean? And
skip 15 seconds, skip 15 seconds. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that with how many more times. I enjoyed this 8.5 minutes of just pure rock and roll, man. I loved it.
I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. So what you're saying is that you would not have like lifted the needle or fast forwarded it or rewound or anything like that. You would have just listened to it.
Not my current state of mind. No. Currently, no.
You're an old soul in a millennial's body.
I mean, like, sure, would I maybe have taken a moment to like go get a drink and come back? Maybe would I have turned to somebody and had a small conversation? Yes, but I would not turn it off. Like it's, I love How Many More Times, and it's 8.5 minutes a song, and that I never thought in my life I would say that about a song. This song, I just really enjoyed listening to.
It's got a great groove. Yeah.
It does. You don't
swings.
Know where it swings. You don't know where it's going. You want to know where it's going. It's great. That was a blast. I really enjoyed listening to Zeppelin I, man. I did. And
what is that noise?
Could you hear that?
Your stomach.
Okay, no, I got the window.
What is it?
I've got the window open. It was a car. It's my stomach. Have another one, Brent. No, I really enjoyed listening to this. I'm glad we came back to Zeppelin. I'm glad we decided to choose these guys to listen to right now, and I'm excited to move on to Zeppelin 2. Zeppelin 2 is going to be next. Let's do it.
But do you want to do that? Do you want to do Zeppelin 2?
Let's do Zeppelin 2 and Zeppelin 3. And if we feel like we want to move on to Zeppelin 4 after that, we can. But definitely Zep 2 is going to be next. And we'll get into it, man. I'm excited. I'm excited to listen to him this week.
Me too.
Okay.
See you later.
Sure. You fucking legend. You fucking Jensen. You legend.